Copenhagen Plank. So I have a leg roller set up on a squat rack. So if you're at a commercial place, you may have access to something like this. A lot of places do not have them. This is my preferred way of doing a side plank. You could use like a rear foot elevated device, those ones that are adjustable. I'll throw an image overlay so you guys can see what that looks like. But if you don't have access to a leg roller, a simple plyo box that you can see through works just fine. If you don't have access to a plyo box, a bench will work just as fine as well. You just want something that you can stick your legs through preferably, so you're not putting that bottom leg in like a super wonky position. Hopefully that makes sense. So when we go through Copenhagen planks, we have a couple different progressions that we do. So my lever is the top leg, and it's relative to how far I put this roller or the bench or whatever you're using for your setup down the leg. So if I put this guy all the way down at my ankle, that's gonna be my hardest position. So I like to put it when I'm just starting with someone to kind of figure out their capacity above their knee in their thigh area. So another reason why I like the roller is it's just easier to get set up on versus like wrestling with a bench or a plyo box. You just simply come to the ground, get that leg where you want it, and then I'm coming to my elbow and I'm holding this position. So I'm trying to hold straight line, head to toe. I wanna make sure that my hips are not drifting backward or too far forward. If I'm drifting back, that's gonna change the physics or the loading that's going into my hip joint, because a lot of times what we'll see is people will shift their hips back and then they'll rotate like this so that I can bias my hip extensors and my hamstrings versus the inner thigh muscle. So I wanna keep everything squared up, meaning hips forward, and I wanna be at a perpendicular angle relative to the floor. And then the bottom side, I wanna be actually a little bit, not quite parallel. I want this hip to be at the same height as my knee, and usually that creates a little bit of a curvature on the bottom side. So that's where we would start, is by starting with my knee my knee past my setup position. So if I have a box or a bench, I'm gonna have my knee up on that box or bench. And then again, we just start with an isometric hold. And then from here, maybe what we do is we add a little bit of a pulse. And then if you're able to, you can add, it's a lot harder to do when you're really close, but trying to come all the way down to a hip tap and then back up to that top position. It actually is a little bit easier. Not easier, it's harder as you scoot out, but it feels more natural to add a bigger excursion with your pulse as you get stronger and you can move further away from the setup position. So then I would scoot out a little bit. Now my knee's on this side of my setup position, and I'm just gonna hold this position, and then I could go into my pulses, and then I could try to come all the way down to the ground and add that hip tap position and get my hip above when I go to that top position. And then you just keep scooting out, right? So ways that we can like regress this is, say that you go to do a Copenhagen plank and it's way too strenuous or it hurts your shoulder. What you can do is you can do a side lying hip adduction, which is a different video, and you'll have to just reach out to us and let us know and we'll swap the videos for you. But just quickly, that side lying hip adduction, is lifting that bottom leg toward the ceiling. And then if I want to scale it past this, having your foot flat on the ground, I personally feel is a little bit harder because you have this long lever arm. So if I'm here and I'm holding this position and I'm in a straight line, I feel like that is harder than being on the bench. And then you could increase the demand by going into like a hip flexion, or you could add a little bit of like a rotation demand. So ways that we can regress it and progress it depending on your body's ability to tolerate the loading, the strength, your strength, and where you feel it at. If you're not feeling it in the inner thigh, we want to adjust your technique to make sure that you're not compensating, and then get those localized tissues strong as you build back into your progressions.